I didn't understand what was happening at first. I simply stood there in the middle of Richmond National Airport, clutching my purse like it was the last familiar thing left in the world. Travelers rushed past me, rolling bags, boarding announcements, children tugging on parents' shirts, but none of them saw me. Not really. And the two people who should have, my son and his wife, they were already slipping through the security checkpoint, walking away without a backward glance. Just minutes before, my daughter-in-law Sabrina had said it as casually as someone pointing out a cloud in the sky. "You know what, Lydia? We only bought you a one-way ticket. You'll figure the return out on your own." She didn't even lower her sunglasses to look at me. She just flashed that tight little smile the kind people wear when they think they've made a practical decision, not a cruel one, and rolled her expensive carry-on straight into the first-class line. My son, Daniel, followed behind her, adjusting the collar of his jacket, avoiding my eyes as if looking at me would slow him down. "You'll figure it out." Those words rang in my ears louder than the overhead speakers calling out delays for flights to Atlanta. I wasn't holding any suitcase they had insisted on checking mine with theirs. I wasn't holding a boarding pass mine had apparently been voided. And the itinerary they printed for me, just a piece of paper meant to keep me quiet until we got here. Only when the gate attendant said, "Ma'am, there is no return trip booked in your name," did the truth land like a stone in my stomach. They had never meant for me to come back with them. My chest tightened as I stood alone, watching strangers flow around my stillness like water around a rock in a stream. A couple pushing a stroller glanced at me with that soft pity people try to hide. A teenager nearly bumped into me, muttered an apology, and kept going. I felt like a misplaced object someone would soon hand to an employee and say, "Someone must have forgotten this." Just hours earlier, I had believed I was on a family trip. A healing trip. They'd called it. My husband, Arthur, had passed only 2 months ago. 40 years of marriage, 40 years of small routines, arguments that dissolved into laughter, late-night tea, shared burdens, shared hopes. We buried him on a cold Thursday morning, and afterward Daniel said, "Mom, you need some air. Come with us. It'll be good." Good. That's what I thought too. I even sold the silver locket Arthur gave me on our 25th anniversary to help with the group costs. Group effort, Sabrina had said with a bright smile that didn't meet her eyes. I didn't ask questions. Why would I? Family is supposed to be a place where questions aren't needed. But at the check-in counter, I saw the signs I refused to read. Sabrina's mother had first-class tags. Daniel and Sabrina had priority boarding. And they had handled my luggage, telling me to just relax. Relax. The word now made my skin crawl. When the ticket agent told me my reservation was incomplete, I turned to call for Daniel, and that was when Sabrina sighed dramatically, pivoted her perfectly styled head, and spoke those rehearsed, careless words. "One-way ticket. You'll figure out the rest." Daniel didn't correct her, didn't defend me, didn't even look ashamed. They just walked away. I stood frozen long after they disappeared into the throng of travelers. My throat tightened, but no tears came. Not yet. The last time I felt this kind of abandonment, I was 8 years old, sitting on a church step waiting for a mother who never came back. This time, the people leaving me behind were the very ones I had raised. My hand drifted toward my phone, not to call Daniel, but to reassure myself it was still there. The only thing I had left. The only thing that still acknowledged my existence. Then I remembered what I carried tucked inside my blouse, close to my heart. A small envelope with the business card of a lawyer, Arthur's oldest friend. "If you ever need help, Lydia, you call me," he'd once said. And now, I would. But what I didn't know then was that being abandoned at that airport wasn't the end. It was the beginning of the one decision. That would change everything they thought they knew. About me. I hadn't spoken the lawyer's name in years, Elias. Rowan, but the moment my fingers brushed the card, the memory of his steady voice returned as clearly as if Arthur had whispered it into my ear himself. Even in the chaos of that airport terminal, even with betrayal clinging to me like a second skin, a spark of resolve cut through the fog. But first came the grief. When Arthur died sudden, devastating, swift, it didn't come like a storm. Storms warn you. They build. His death came like a light switching off in a room you'd lived in your whole life. One moment he was tying his shoelaces in the hallway, humming the same country tune he'd hummed for years, asking if I'd seen his reading glasses. The next moment he was on the floor, eyes closed as if in mid-prayer. A heart attack, the doctors said. Instant. Final. Irreversible. Arthur had been mine for 4 decades. 40 years of inside jokes, burnt toast, repaired fences, Sunday walks, and shared worries. 40 years of choosing each other. And then suddenly, I was a widow with a house full of echoes. I remember standing by our kitchen window the night after the funeral. Rain slid down the glass in slow, heavy lines. I thought it matched me, quiet, persistent, unable to stop. Friends brought casseroles and condolences. Neighbors left flowers. But after 2 weeks, the visits slowed. And Daniel, my own son, stopped calling every day. Then every week. Then sometimes not at all. So when he finally showed up on my doorstep with Sabrina at his side, offering a family getaway, to clear your head, my heart surged with something dangerously close to hope. I had missed him. I had missed being included. Sabrina had done all the talking. Naturally. Lydia, we thought we could take the kids to Palm Shore this spring. Beach air, sunshine. It might help you breathe again. I'd swallowed my grief and nodded. Yes, I'd said, feeling like a small flame had flickered back to life inside me. Yes, I'd love that. I didn't hesitate when they mentioned the costs being shared. I didn't want to be a burden. I wanted to contribute. Belong. Feel needed. So I opened the jewelry case Arthur gave me years ago. Inside was the delicate silver locket he bought me on our 25th wedding anniversary, engraved with our initials. I hadn't worn it since the funeral. My hands trembled as I carried it to the pawn shop. You sure, Mum? The owner asked gently. I lied with a smile. Just downsizing. I walked out with a small stack of bills and a hollow ache where the locket had been. But I told myself the trip was worth the cost. Family was worth it. Oh, how foolish I felt now, standing in the airport, watching the last people in line pass through security, realizing I wasn't part of their plans. I had only been part of their budget. But a strange thing happened as the betrayal settled. Instead of collapsing, something inside me straightened. My spine lengthened. My breath steadied. My grief, which had swallowed me whole for weeks, suddenly sharpened into clarity. I walked to a nearby bench, sat down, and smoothed my sweater. My hands no longer shook. Not from heartbreak anyway. From certainty. I opened my phone not to call Daniel but to scroll to the number I hadn't dialed in 10 years. Elias Rowan. Turning my thumb hovered over the line for a long, still second. The noise of the terminal faded away. It was just me, the cold truth, and the choice in front of me. Then I pressed call. He answered on the second ring, his voice warm, familiar, and surprised. Lydia? My goodness. How are you? I didn't give him the softened, polite answer I had given everyone since Arthur's death. I didn't say fine. Didn't say hanging in there. Instead, with a steadiness that startled even me, I said, Elias, I need to update my will. The silence on his end was brief but weighted. Then he said, Of course. Come in. And just like that, for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt the ground solidify beneath my feet. But I had no idea that the changes I would make in that lawyer's office would shatter my son's world more completely than anything he'd ever done to me. The taxi ride from Richmond National Airport to Rowan and Harley legal offices felt unreal, as if I were floating outside my own life, watching a stranger make decisions I never imagined I would make. The cab smelled faintly of Pioneer freshener and leftover fries. Rain from earlier had darkened the pavement, and every traffic light reflected off the wet roads like melted amber. I stared out the window, gripping the small envelope Arthur and I once called our fire fund. It held $900 in carefully saved bills. He used to joke, "If life ever decides to kick us, at least we'll have bus fare to start over." Well, life had kicked me, and I wasn't going to stay on the ground. When the cab turned onto Jefferson Avenue, my heartbeat quickened. I hadn't been to this office in over a decade, not since Arthur and I updated our documents when he retired. Back then, everything had been so simple. Everything to each other. And then to Daniel. We thought blood guaranteed loyalty. We thought raising a child meant he'd remember who raised him. We were wrong. The building looked exactly the same, brick exterior, green-trimmed windows, weathered sign that still read Rowan and Harley. A small bell chimed as I stepped inside. It smelled of old books, furniture polish, and something warm like someone had been drinking cinnamon tea. "Lydia." A familiar voice called from the back. I turned. There he was, Elias Rowan, older now, silver in his beard, glasses perched on his nose. He moved a little slower than I remembered, but when he reached for my hand, his grip was still steady, still firm. "Good Lord, it's been years," he murmured, guiding me into his office. I was so sorry to hear about Arthur. I nodded, not trusting my voice. He settled behind his desk, folded his hands, and looked at me with concern, not performance, not politeness, but genuine concern. "How can I help you today?" I exhaled through the heaviness in my chest. "I want to change my will." His eyebrows lifted slightly. "All right. Tell me what you'd like to adjust." "I want my son removed from it." Elias paused, not in judgment, but in that careful way a lawyer pauses when something big, irreversible, and emotionally charged has just been spoken aloud. "You're sure?" he asked softly. "Yes," I said, and the word landed with the weight of everything I had endured. "Remove Daniel. Remove his wife. Remove them entirely." He didn't interrupt. He didn't try to soften anything. He simply nodded and opened a file. "All right," he said. "Let's go through it line by line." For the next hour, we dismantled the future Arthur and I had once imagined. House ownership, land parcels, savings, insurance, even small items categorized in the personal effects section. All of it, every part that once would have belonged to Daniel, was struck out. But I didn't remove them out of spite. I removed them out of recognition. Recognition of who they had become, and who I no longer was. When we were done, Elias leaned back in his chair. "Who would you like listed as your new beneficiary?" I pulled from my purse a pamphlet I had picked up months ago at the community center. I never expected to use it. Not for myself anyway. "I want everything to go to Halfstead Alliance," I said. "It's an organization for older adults abandoned or financially exploited by family." Elias looked at the pamphlet, then back at me. "That's specific. So is what happened to me." He nodded slowly. "And you want this notarized immediately? No opportunity for contesting?" "No opportunities," I said. "No loopholes. No access for them. Not ever." He marked the paperwork, then pulled out a large bound folder. "We'll need signatures here, here, and here. Once complete, This becomes legally binding. My hands did not shake as I signed. Not once, when we finished. Elias sealed the updated documents in an envelope and slid them across the desk. "Lydia," he said quietly. This was a hard step, but it was a strong one. I swallowed the knot in my throat. "I don't feel strong yet. You will." I believed him. Walking out of that office, envelope in hand, cold wind brushing my cheeks, I felt something unfamiliar but unmistakable. Control. My control. For the first time in years, I stepped back into the cab feeling lighter, not because anything was fixed, but because something had finally begun. But I didn't know then that this single choice to rewrite my future would soon turn my son's perfect world upside down in a way he never saw coming. I checked into a small roadside motel that night, Maple Crest Inn. The kind of place with buzzing neon lights and slightly crooked room numbers. But to me, it felt like neutral ground. A place where I wasn't a widow, or a mother who'd been abandoned at an airport, or a woman pretending she was fine. I was simply Lydia. The room smelled faintly of detergent and old carpet. The bedspread was patterned with faded blue flowers. I set the envelope from Elias on the table, smoothed my sweater, and sat down. For the first time in hours, the world was quiet enough to hear my thoughts. I opened the folder and stared at the pages arranged neatly inside. Revised beneficiary lists, notarized signatures, asset transfers, written instructions for estate execution, my life, broken down into columns and legal clauses. Arthur used to say, "If anything ever happens to me, make sure you're protected." Lyd. I had always rolled my eyes, calling him dramatic. But he had been right. He always was. The motel lamp cast a soft golden circle over the table as I reviewed every detail. Not to question them, no. I was more certain of this than anything I'd done in years, but to claim them. To understand them. To own them. The house Arthur and I had paid off after 30 years. The quarter-acre garden plot behind it. The small farmland parcel I inherited from my father. The savings we quietly accumulated. The emergency fund only I knew about. All of it now flowed in a direction Daniel had never anticipated. I had always imagined my legacy passing to him out of love. But legacy means nothing if it's handed to someone who sees you as a wallet, not a person. When the clock hit 11 p.m., I called Elias one more time. "I want digital copies," I told him. "Password protected. Sent to an email only I access. Of course. And the physical originals should stay with you. Locked. Fireproof. Accessible only by you and the executor listed." "Understood." "And Elias?" I paused. "If Daniel or Sabrina contacts you, please tell them the truth. He didn't miss a beat. I'll tell them they were removed at your explicit request." The words lifted something heavy off my chest. After the call, I stared at the ceiling. The motel walls were thin. I could hear a television somewhere next door and someone arguing about pizza toppings 2 doors down. But instead of feeling trapped or anxious, I felt safe. The first safe I'd felt since Arthur died. When morning came, light filtered through the cheap curtains. I rose slowly, made myself the motel's tiny coffee, and faced the day with a surprising calm. There was more work to do. I left the motel and walked to a nearby post office. With steady hands, I mailed copies of the updated estate documents to a new safety deposit box I had rented in my name alone. I changed every password on every account, updated emergency contacts, and removed Daniel from all financial authorization at the bank. The teller asked politely, "Would you like to add a family member to your file for convenience?" "No," I said, and this time the word didn't hurt. "This one's just for me. Just for me." 2 simple words. They used to feel lonely. Now they felt like survival. As I walked out of the bank, I noticed something smaller group of children playing on the grass outside the community center. Their laughter was bright, chaotic, full of life. For a moment, I stood still and watched them, letting the warmth of the morning settle into me. Arthur and I had always talked about joy as something you had to look for. Today, I found a piece of it right there on the sidewalk. I wasn't done rebuilding. Not by a long shot. But I had taken the first steps. And I could almost feel Arthur beside me, resting a hand on my shoulder, murmuring, "A taggle." I smiled for the first time all day. But the true turning point wasn't the paperwork. It was what I would do next. A choice that would pull the very foundation out from under my son, before he even knew it was cracking. 2 days later, as if guided by something deeper than planning or logic, I returned to the house Arthur and I had shared for decades. It stood there quietly on Hawthorne Drive, with its peeling shutters, paint-chipped porch rails, and the familiar old wind chime Arthur hung the year Daniel was born. The breeze nudged it gently, but the sound didn't warm me like it used to. It sounded... Final. The moving truck pulled in behind me, a company from 2 counties over. One I chose specifically, so no one in town would gossip. I didn't want whispers. I didn't want sympathy. I wanted distance. The driver stepped out, clipboard in hand. "Just a few pieces?" he asked, glancing at the minimal list I'd sent. "Just a few," I confirmed. I unlocked the front door with the spare key Arthur always kept hidden in the terracotta planter for emergencies, he'd say. And though this wasn't the emergency he imagined, it qualified all the same. Inside, the house felt smaller than I remembered. Maybe because I had outgrown the version of myself who lived here. The shadows were longer, the corners quieter. Even the dust seemed to hold memories I no longer wished to carry. The movers waited at the door as I walked through the home one last time. "I'll let you know what comes with me," I said softly. They nodded and stayed near the entry, giving me space. First, I went to the living room. There was Arthur's favorite recliner, aged, worn at the arms, dipped in the middle where he sat for years reading the newspaper or dozing off during documentaries. I placed my hand on it gently. "This one," I told the movers. They carried it out with more respect than I expected. Next was the bookshelf. I chose only the volumes Arthur loved most: old military biographies, weathered travel journals, the poetry book he read to me the night before our 10th anniversary. I placed them carefully in a small box. Then the wedding album. Our whole life pressed between glossy pages. And the navy cap Arthur wore in his 20s, when he still believed he was invincible. In the guest room, I picked up the quilt my mother stitched before she passed, soft from years of washing. That was all. No dining table. No bedroom set. No kitchenware. No photos of Daniel's family. Just what still felt honest. Time, when the movers loaded the last piece into the truck, I walked the house again. Slower this. The kitchen where Arthur twirled me in my robe on Sunday mornings. The staircase we painted together one summer, dripping teal on the carpet. The hallway where he collapsed. The spot where his coffee mug had shattered. I didn't cry. I thought I would. But leaving a place where you were forgotten feels less like loss and more like release. In the kitchen, I placed an envelope on the counter. Inside were the house keys and a short note. "Don't call. Don't ask. I am exactly where I want to be. No signature. None needed." I stepped outside, closed the door gently, not looking back. The ride to my new home took less than 2 hours, but emotionally it felt like crossing into a different life altogether. When we arrived, a painted wooden sign stood proudly at the entrance. Cedar, Brook Haven. Independent living with dignity. Arthur and I had visited it long ago, just to plan ahead, as he'd put it. I remembered laughing at him, insisting we'd stay in our own home until we were old and grey. But he must have known something. I didn't. Maybe he felt the future tilting beneath us long before I did. Inside Cedar Brook Haven smelled faintly of lemon polish and fresh bread. Sunlight spilled across wide hallways and soft jazz played somewhere in the distance. People looked up when I entered, not through me, but at me. As if I mattered. As if I belonged. "Welcome, Mrs. Harland," the receptionist said warmly. "We've been expecting you." For a moment, the sting in my chest softened. They said my name like it wasn't a burden. Like it wasn't an afterthought. Like it mattered. My room was a small corner unit with a window facing the courtyard. The movers set my things exactly where I asked. My chair near the window, my books on the shelf, my quilt folded neatly on the bed. On the desk was a welcome basket, crackers, jam, and a handwritten note from the director. "Thank you for helping make this place possible. Your generosity will create safety for so many. This is your home now." 2. I realized then what they didn't know. What Daniel would never know. Cedar Brook Haven was partially funded through the donation I'd arranged with Halfstead Alliance. I hadn't just rewritten my will. I had rewritten my place in the world. And for the first time in months, I felt something close to peace. But peace doesn't last forever, because 6 months later, everything I'd kept quiet would land in my son's lap like a bomb he never saw coming. 6 months passed quietly, so quietly. In fact, that if I hadn't lived through the chaos that came before, I might have believed peace was my natural state. At Cedar Brook Haven, the days had a gentle rhythm. Morning sunlight through the courtyard. Soft laughter from the community room. The hum of conversation during breakfast. For the first time in years, silence didn't feel like something pressing on my chest. It felt like air. Like rest. I joined a book circle. 6 women and 1 soft-spoken widower named Harold, who always brought a crossword puzzle to share. We met every afternoon with mismatched mugs of herbal tea, arguing about plots and praising characters as if we knew them personally. They didn't treat me like a burden or like a guest. They treated me like part of something. In the evenings, I took slow-paced yoga classes in the courtyard. I couldn't balance on one foot for long, but no one laughed. The instructor, a patient woman named Mara, always told me, "You're steadier this week, Lydia." Maybe she said that to everyone, but somehow it felt true. I discovered the art studio on my 3rd week. Tables scattered with watercolors and brushes. Canvases half finished. Sunlight hitting jars of paint water like glass lanterns. I hadn't painted since Daniel was a toddler. Back then, life had pushed hobbies aside. Diapers, school lunches, bills, work, grocery lists. But now I could pick colors just because I liked them. My first strokes were clumsy, too bright, too bold. But the joy that rushed through me, I didn't question it. Harold walked by as I painted a lopsided bluebird and said, "Looks like it wants to fly," for the first time in years. So, did I. One afternoon, while cleaning brushes in the studio sink, a resident named Ruth, quiet, gentle, with silver hair pinned back by a blue barrette, approached me. She hesitated, then asked softly, "Do you ever regret it?" She didn't say what it was. She didn't need to. The question hovered between us like something fragile. I met her eyes. "I regret not doing it sooner." She nodded once, then went back to her easel without another word. That's the thing about people who've lived long lives. They don't force conversations. They understand the weight of silence. That night, I sat in my cozy corner unit with the window cracked open, letting in the cool evening breeze. On the desk beside me was a framed photo of Arthur, the one where he's laughing so hard his eyes are almost shut. I lit a small candle next to it. Not for mourning anymore, for gratitude. "I'm okay," I told him softly. "More than okay." The candle flickered lightly, as if agreeing. Then, after a long moment, I added something I had never dared say aloud. They thought leaving me at that airport would break me. But it didn't. They're the ones who lost something that day. Saying it didn't hurt. It felt true. People like Daniel and Sabrina make a grave mistake. They confuse silence with weakness. They confuse patience with passiveness. They confuse love with permission. For years, I allowed them to take and take, thinking one day they'd remember to give. But kindness is not a bottomless well. Eventually, it runs dry. Here at Cedar Brook, I had become more than the woman my son forgot to call. More than the widow rattling around in an empty house. More than the mother abandoned at gate C13. I was Lydia. The woman who read 3 novels in a week. The woman who painted birds that looked like bruised clouds. The woman who people knocked on the door for at dinner time. The woman who had a seat saved for her, every single night. And the most startling thing? I liked who I was becoming. Some nights I walked the courtyard with my cane, the lantern lights warm against the brick paths. I'd stop near the fountain, listening to the soft splash of water, and breathe the kind of deep, full breaths I thought I'd never take again. If Arthur could see me now, I think he'd smile. If Daniel could see me, I think he'd panic. But he didn't see me. Not yet. Because somewhere out in the world, a letter addressed to him had been moving through the mail system slowly, silently, inevitably. This morning, everything would change. Because the moment my son opened that envelope, the calm 6 months I'd built would shatter his world, and for the first time, he would understand exactly what he'd lost. The day finally came. The one I had circled in discreet red ink on the small calendar, pinned to the inside of my wardrobe. I didn't need a reminder. My heart knew. The letter Elias had prepared the official notice of the will's complete. Restructuring was scheduled to arrive on Daniel's doorstep by 8 a.m. I was in the dining hall at Cedar Brook Haven, holding a warm mug of chamomile tea while sunlight pooled across the tables. My mind felt strangely quiet, like the air right before a storm. By 11 a.m. My phone started vibrating. Once, twice, then every few minutes. Non-stop. Daniel Harland. Incoming. Callie didn't answer. Not the first time. Not the 5th. Not the 13th. Residents glanced at my buzzing phone curiously, but no one asked questions. That's the beautiful thing about living among people who have lived long enough. They know that sometimes silence is the kindest answer. By late afternoon, the calls slowed. Then my phone chimed with a new notification. An email. Subject: I'm sorry, Mom, but can we at least talk about the land? I opened it not out of interest, but out of curiosity. I wanted to see how he'd word it, what tone he'd use, whether he'd even attempt honesty. The email began, Mum, we received the letter from your lawyer today. I don't even know how to react. Sabrina is here beside me, and she's upset. I'm upset. We didn't think you would actually go through with something like this. I know the trip wasn't perfect. Maybe we should have handled things differently at the airport. But one mistake doesn't erase family. It doesn't erase everything we've done for you through the years. But removing us from everything. The house, the savings, the farmland, everything. Mum, this is extreme. At least let us keep the garden property. You know the kids helped plant that. You know it has meaning. It's unfair to punish us like this. We're not perfect, but we're still your family. Please call me. 5 minutes. Please. Daniele read the message twice. Not because it pained me, no. Because I wanted to absorb every manipulative turn of phrase. We didn't think you'd actually go through with it. There it was, the assumption that I was too soft to protect myself. One mistake doesn't erase family. Leaving your grieving mother without a ticket, money, or luggage was not one mistake. It was a decision. Everything we've done for you. What everything, exactly? The occasional phone call. The dutiful holiday visit. And then the clincher. You're punishing us. Punishment implies vengeance. This wasn't vengeance. This was clarity. The garden he spoke of, the one they wanted so desperately, was the very land Halstead Alliance's regional director had already visited. The plan for it was beautiful. A therapeutic horticulture program for older women, recovering from neglect or financial exploitation. A place where hands that had been dismissed or overlooked could grow something new. Daniel didn't want the garden because of memories. Sabrina didn't want it because of the children. They wanted it because they had built a lifestyle on comfort and comfort costs. But that comfort was no longer coming from me. My thumb hovered over the reply button. For one tiny second, I considered writing, "I'm not punishing you. I'm finally protecting myself." But he wouldn't understand. Not because he couldn't, but because he didn't want to. Instead, I closed the laptop. In the corner of the library, Harold looked up from his crossword puzzle. "Everything all right?" he asked gently. I nodded. "Everything is exactly the way it should be." He smiled, the kind of smile shared between survivors of life's quieter battles. "Good. The world needs more women who mean what they say." Later, as I walked back to my room, my phone buzzed again, another call from Daniel. I let it ring until it stopped. I didn't owe him a conversation. I'd already given him something better. A truth he couldn't twist. In my room, I wrote a journal entry. Some things are inherited. Some things are earned. But peace? Peace is built. And I built mine without them. When I finished writing, the weight in my chest had completely vanished. The past was behind me. My future was my own. And the door to my life, the one Daniel once assumed he controlled, was now shut. Locked, quiet, final. But the story wasn't finished yet, because soon Daniel and Sabrina would show up in person, demanding answers. And what happened then would test every ounce of strength I had rebuilt. Top of form. It happened 3 weeks after Daniel's frantic emails started tapering off. I'd almost begun to believe he'd accepted the truth in his own quiet, resentful way. Life at Cedar Brook Haven had fallen back into its gentle rhythm: morning tea in the courtyard, watercolor classes on Thursdays, book circle in the afternoons. Peace had become not just a feeling, but a habit. Then the front desk called my room. "Mrs. Harland? You have visitors." Visitors, plural. My stomach tightened, not with fear, but with annoyance. Cedar Brook wasn't a revolving door, and I certainly hadn't invited anyone. Still, I smoothed my blouse, steadied my breathing, and made my way down to the main lobby. And there they were. Daniel, tense jaw, red-rimmed eyes, still wearing the same cologne he'd overused since college. And Sabrina, arms crossed, sunglasses perched on her head indoors, expression sharp enough to cut glass. They looked wildly out of place among the soft jazz, sunflower print wall art, and residents quietly doing puzzles at the lobby tables. Their presence was loud, intrusive, a storm in a sanctuary. "Mum," Daniel said, stepping forward as if expecting a hug. I didn't move. His arms faltered mid-open. Sabrina was less subtle. "We need to talk," she said, her tone clipped. "Then talk," I replied, motioning to a quiet corner. "But keep your voices down. This isn't the airport." Daniel winced. Sabrina's lips tightened. We sat at a small table near the window, sunlight spilling across us. They looked uncomfortable, like the warmth itself was judging them. Sabrina wasted no time. "We got the final notice from your lawyer," she said. "Everything. All of it sent to that place." She gestured vaguely, as if Cedar Brook Haven were an alien planet. "Why would you do that?" "Because it's mine," I said calmly. "And because I chose to." Daniel leaned forward, desperation cracking through his voice. Mum, we made a mistake, okay? The airport, yes, it was bad. But we said we were sorry. Why do this to us? I met his eyes steadily. You didn't say you were sorry, Daniel. You were sorry you got caught. He opened his mouth, then closed it. I continued. When you left me at that airport, you didn't just forget a detail. You made a choice. A deliberate one. And choices come with consequences. Sabrina scoffed. So you take everything? That's petty, Lydia. Don't call me petty, I said, my voice low but firm. I gave you 40 years of my life. I raised you, Daniel. I supported you through every mistake you made. And when Arthur died, when I was drowning, you didn't reach out to pull me up. You pushed me further under. Daniel swallowed hard. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. Silence settled. Heavy. Uncomfortable. Real. Finally, Daniel murmured, We could have used the land, Mom. The garden. The house. The kids. The kids, I repeated softly, are not the issue. You are. Sabrina's face twisted. This is unbelievable. You're just giving away property to strangers. Not strangers, I corrected. People who won't abandon me in an airport. People who know what it means to care for someone without expecting something in return. Daniel's shoulders hunched. So that's it? We're just cut off? No, I said, leaning back. You cut yourselves off. He blinked hard, tears gathering despite himself. Mom, I'm your son. I know, I whispered. And I loved you enough to believe that would always mean something. But love is a bridge, Daniel. And you burned it. His breath hitched. Sabrina stood abruptly. We're wasting our time. She's made up her mind. Yes, I said. I have. Daniel rose slower. He looked at me as though seeing me for the first time, not as a resource, not as a backup plan, not as an obligation, but as a person with boundaries he never expected me to enforce. Okay, he said finally. If this is really what you want, I can't stop you. You can't, I agreed. He hesitated. But I hope someday you'll forgive us. I didn't respond. Forgiveness is a gift, not an obligation. They walked out. Sabrina leading the way with clipped steps, Daniel trailing behind. Shoulders slumped out, I watched them go, not with victory, not with bitterness, but with release. A soft voice broke into my thoughts. You all right? It was Harold, holding a crossword book. Yes, I said, exhaling slowly. I actually am. He nodded and handed me a pencil. Good. Come on then. We're on a tough clue and we could use your brain. I followed him back inside. The door closed behind us with a gentle click. For the first time in my life, goodbye didn't hurt. But as peaceful as that goodbye was, life had one final twist waiting for me. An unexpected message that would challenge everything I thought I knew about the future I'd chosen. The next few days at Cedar Brook passed in that light. Steady way peace often arrives quietly than all at once. I expected to feel shaken after Daniel and Sabrina's visit. I expected tears, anger, trembling hands. But none came. Instead, a surprising sense of finality settled over me. Not sorrow, not gloating, just closure. For the first time in over a year, my heart felt like it could unclench. I returned to my routines. Morning tea with Helen. Yoga with Mara in the courtyard. Crossword puzzles with Harold. Painting soft blue swirls in the art room that looked almost like smoke rising. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. 4 days after Daniel's visit, I was in the common room helping arrange books on the donation table when the receptionist poked her head inside. Mrs. Harland. You have a message. A message. Not a visitor this time, thank heavens, but a note. Delivered earlier that morning while I was in yoga. I wiped my hands on my sweater and walked to the front desk. The receptionist handed me a sealed envelope, cream-colored, my name written in a careful, looping script. Not Daniel's handwriting. Not Sabrina's. Not anyone from Cedar Brook. I turned it over. No return address. Small prickle of unease crawled up my spine, not fear, exactly, but the sense that this envelope held something that would ripple through everything I'd rebuilt. I opened it slowly. Inside was a single sheet of paper. As I unfolded it, my breath caught not in dread, but disbelief. The message read, Mrs. Harland. My name is Evelyn Rowan, Elias Rowan's daughter. My father passed away peacefully last month. Before he died, he instructed me to reach out to you personally. Among his final notes, he left a locked file labeled with your name. He wrote, Deliver to Lydia only when she is ready. I have that file. Please contact me at your earliest convenience. With respect, Evelyn R. For several seconds, I couldn't move. Not because of grief, though. Elias's passing did hit me with a quiet sadness, but because of the last line. Deliver to Lydia only when she is ready. Ready for what? As if answering the question clawing at my mind, the receptionist gently added, She left a number 2, dear. It's attached. I turned the paper over. There it was, a small business card tucked under a PAPE RCLIP. Evelyn Rowan, Estate Executor, private line. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. I stepped outside into the courtyard. Cold air brushing my cheeks. Residents chatted at nearby tables, unaware that my world had tilted again. Why would Elias leave me a file? We hadn't spoken for years before the will update. He'd helped out of loyalty to Arthur, right? Unless a strange, soft possibility pressed into my thoughts. No. Surely not. I sat on the bench beneath the maple tree, the one that turned brilliant red in fall, and forced my breathing to steady. For 6 months, I had believed the story was done. I'd rebuilt my life, closed the doors behind me, locked the ones that needed locking. But this letter, this unexpected message, this file Elias saved for me. What if there was something Arthur had left behind? What if there were details he'd entrusted to Elias that he never had the chance to share? What if there were pieces of our life, our marriage, our future that I didn't know about? Or worse, what if there was something Daniel had done long before the airport incident? Something Elias had discovered while managing our legal affairs? My heart thud. I wasn't afraid. But I wasn't calm either. I pulled my phone from my sweater pocket. My thumb hovered over the keypad. Before dialing, I whispered into the cold air. All right, Arthur. If you left something unsaid, I'm listening. Then I dialed the number. It rang once. Twice. On the third ring, a calm voice answered. Hello? Mrs. Harland? I was hoping you'd call. Evelyn, I breathed. Your letter. I don't understand. I know, she said gently. But you will. And when you see what my father left for you, it will change everything you thought you knew about your past and your future. The courtyard blurred around me. My grip tightened on the phone. Change everything. Everything in my life had already changed. What more could there be? I didn't know it yet, but the file Elias left behind didn't just contain facts. It held a truth Arthur had protected for years. A truth that would reshape everything I believed about love, loyalty, and the life I thought I'd already reclaimed. The next morning, after a night of restless twisting and half-formed dreams, I took a cab to the address Evelyn gave me, a small office suite on the east side of town. Not the polished brick building her father worked in for decades. This was newer, sleeker, with frosted glass doors and clean white walls. A fresh start for a new generation. The cab ride was quiet. Too quiet. Even the driver seemed to sense I wasn't in the mood for conversation. My mind spun with every possibility, good, bad, unimaginable. What could Elias have saved for me? Why did Arthur's name feel tangled up in the edges of that question like a loose thread? The cab pulled up just as a soft breeze swept across the parking lot. Fall leaves skittered around my feet as I stepped out. I paused at the entrance and inhaled deeply. I had survived abandonment, grief, betrayal, and rebuilding my life brick by brick. I could handle a file. Inside, a petite woman with warm hazel eyes looked up from behind a mahogany desk. "You must be Mrs. Harland," she said, smiling gently. "I'm Evelyn." She had her father's calmness, steady eyes, steady voice, steady presence. The kind of steadiness that made you feel anchored just by being near it. "Please," she gestured. "Come with me." Her office was simple. Shelves lined with labeled binders, a few framed certificates, and one photo of her with Elias at a fishing pier, both laughing. I felt a small ache at the sight of him. Evelyn sat, folded her hands, and regarded me with careful kindness. "My father thought the world of you," she said softly. I blinked, startled. "We only spoke professionally." "That's what you believe," she replied. "But he cared. He cared for your husband too. More than you knew." She reached into a drawer, a deep one, and withdrew a thick, dark blue folder. My name was written across the front in Elias's tidy penmanship. Lydia, Harlan CONFID, and all my breath hitched. Evelyn placed it gently on the desk between us. "This," she said, "is what you wanted you to have. Only when you were ready." "Ready for what?" I whispered. She hesitated. "To know the truth." My pulse pounded as I opened the folder. The first page was a handwritten note from Elias himself, dated 2 years before Arthur died. "Lydia, if you are reading this, then the moment has come for clarity. Arthur asked me to hold these documents for you. He wanted you to have them only after he was gone, and only when your life changed enough that you were standing on your own strength again. Do not fear what's inside. It was meant to protect you." Elias, my hands trembled not with fear, but with the weight of what was coming. Behind the letter were a series of official papers, legal correspondence, financial statements, medical reports, insurance adjustments. Then something that stopped my breath cold. A series of letters neatly folded, each addressed to Elias but written by Arthur. The first line of the top letter read, "I'm worried about Daniel." I froze. Evelyn watched me closely, but didn't speak. My fingers trembled as I read the rest. "I love my son, but I can't ignore what I'm seeing. He pressures Lydia for money she never mentions to me. He's talked to me about future assets more than a child should. I've already caught him trying to access her banking information twice. She doesn't see it, or doesn't want to. Please help me protect her if I'm ever unable to." I covered my mouth, stunned. Arthur knew? All along, he knew? Letter after letter revealed the same story. Arthur quietly safeguarding our accounts, shifting certain funds out of reach, instructing Elias to secure them in my name alone. One letter, written only months before he died, shook me to my core. "If anything happens to me, Lydia will be vulnerable. Our son has a good heart somewhere, but he's lost his way. Promise me you'll give her the truth if she ever needs strength to walk away from him. She deserves a life of dignity, not one where she is treated as a convenience." I couldn't breathe. Arthur, my Arthur, had seen what I refused to. He had been protecting me long before I understood I needed protection. Tears blurred the words, dripping onto the page. Not grief tears, not betrayal tears, but tears of being loved beyond the grave. Evelyn handed me a tissue. "My father honored his promise," she murmured. "He believed you'd know when you were strong enough to face this. And I think he was right." I closed the folder, pressing both palms on its cover. My world hadn't shattered, it had solidified. Arthur hadn't abandoned me. He had prepared me. He had seen Daniel clearly when I couldn't. And he'd left me the strength to do what I'd done at the airport. At the lawyer's office at Cedar Brook. I hadn't rebuilt my life alone. Arthur had been holding the nails the whole time. But I didn't realize yet Arthur's letters were only the beginning. At the bottom of the folder was another document. One that would force me to make the most difficult decision of my new life. I sat there in Evelyn's office for what felt like an eternity. My fingers resting on the closed folder, as though it might suddenly vanish. When my breathing finally steadied, Evelyn quietly said, "There's one more thing." Her tone shifted, still gentle, but heavier, as if what came next carried its own weight. She reached into the folder again and slid out a thin sealed envelope. This one wasn't marked with my name. It wasn't marked at all. Just blank ivory paper, edges slightly yellowed with time. Arthur's handwriting was on the flap. I recognized it instantly, the way he looped his RS, the way his J's dipped low, like they were bowing. My throat tightened. "This," Evelyn said softly, "is the last letter your husband wrote. My father kept it by instruction. He said you were only to receive it after reading the documents." I stared at the envelope. I wasn't ready. But I had never really been ready for anything that happened these last 2 years. Yet here I was. After a long breath, I slid my thumb under the flap and opened it. Arthur's voice, preserved in ink, spilled across the page. "My Lydia, if you are reading this, then the world has already taken me from you. And I'm sorry for that. But I know you. You will move forward, not quickly, not easily, but with the quiet strength you've always carried. I saw something in our son long before you were willing to. You loved him too much to see him clearly. That's not your fault. That's a mother's blessing and her burden. There may come a time when he tests you, hurts you, or forgets you in ways you never imagined. If that time comes, I want you to have this truth. You owe him nothing but honesty and boundaries. Love is not a debt. It is a gift we offer freely until someone takes advantage of it. If you ever feel abandoned, if he ever makes you question your place in this world, remember, I never once questioned yours. Your kindness is rare. Your loyalty is extraordinary. Don't let anyone, especially the people you love, convince you to shrink. Live the rest of your life boldly. Lydia, make choices for yourself. Travel, paint, laugh. Let people care for you the way you cared for others. And if you ever find happiness again, whether in friendship or love, don't turn away from it. You deserve more than loneliness. I'll be with you anyway. Always." Arthur, by the time I finished reading, tears blurred everything. They fell silently, like they'd been waiting behind my ribs for months, maybe years. The room seemed to grow warmer around me, as though Arthur were standing right behind my chair, his familiar hand on my shoulder. Evelyn waited quietly, not rushing me, not speaking, just letting me feel. When I found my voice, it came out small. "He knew so much," I whispered. "More than I gave him credit for. My father said Arthur was one of the most perceptive men he ever worked with," Evelyn replied. "He didn't want to burden you while he was alive, but he wanted to protect you after." I traced my fingers over the letter. Arthur had seen Daniel clearly long before I ever did. He had prepared for the day I finally opened my eyes, and now, because of that folder, I could never go back to pretending. But Evelyn wasn't finished. "There is one final document," she said. "And before I give it to you, I need to explain something." She pulled out a legal envelope, a kind used for contracts and formal declarations. The seal bore the Rowan firm's insignia. "This," she continued carefully, "is a request your husband filed months before he died. It concerns a transfer of trusteeship and oversight rights. I frowned. Oversight rights? She nodded slowly. For financial guardianship. Specifically over you. I froze. What are you saying? Arthur anticipated that Daniel might attempt to challenge your decisions if anything ever happened to him, Evelyn explained. So he filed papers to assign you a secondary protector, someone who could legally intervene on your behalf if your son tried to manipulate or pressure you. My heart beat hard. A protector? Who? Evelyn pushed the envelope toward me. Open it, she said. It's not who you think. My hand shook as I broke the seal. The first line made my breath catch. Nominee for secondary guardian. Harold M. Avery Harold. The gentleman in the courtyard. The crossword partner. The widower who always saved me a seat. Arthur had chosen him. My vision spun. Why Harold? How did Arthur know him? And why would he trust him with something so important? Evelyn's next words landed like a stone in my chest. Our fathers knew each other decades ago, she said quietly. Harold wasn't a stranger to your husband. He was someone Arthur trusted deeply. My entire world tilted. And as the truth unraveled, I realized Harold wasn't just a new friend in my life. He was a piece of my past that Arthur had intentionally placed in my future. For a long moment, I couldn't speak. The name on the document stared up at me, steady and undeniable. Harold M. Avery, nominee for secondary guardian and protector Harold. The same Harold who brought me crosswords. The same Harold who saved my seat at dinner. The same Harold whose quiet company had become part of the rhythm of my new life. But the shock wasn't that. Arthur had trusted Harold. It was why he had trusted him. My pulse thudded loudly in my ears. I looked up at Evelyn. How did they know each other? Harold never said. He wouldn't, she replied softly. My father said Harold was a very private man. And Arthur respected that. She reached for a slim binder that had been tucked at the bottom of the folder. Opening it to reveal a grainy photograph clipped to the inside cover. It was old, taken maybe 35 years ago. A fishing dock. 2 men standing side by side, smiling. Arthur and Harold. My breath froze. They looked young, relaxed, familiar. Their stance wasn't casual acquaintance, it was the comfortable closeness of men who had shared a history. My father told me, Evelyn continued, that Harold and Arthur worked together for years. Back when they were both in the Environmental Restoration Division. They traveled for projects, shared assignments, became friends. I stared at the picture, stunned. Arthur never mentioned Harold, never hinted at this entire chapter of his life. Why didn't Arthur tell me? I whispered. Evelyn shook her head gently. My guess? Because talking about the past was painful for him. After Harold's wife died, Harold withdrew completely. Arthur always said Harold was the kind of man who carried his grief quietly. Like a shadow. I felt something shift inside me, a strange mingling of sadness, relief and disbelief. And Harold lives here, I murmured. In the same community. And he knew Arthur? He didn't know you'd end up here, Evelyn said quickly. None of us did. But when my father told him your name was on the new resident list, Harold agreed not to say anything unless Arthur's file came into play. So he's known the whole time. My voice cracked. Known you as Arthur's wife. Evelyn nodded. Yes. I leaned back in my chair, dizzy with the implications. Harold had known me from the first day I arrived. Known exactly who I was. Known what Arthur meant to me. And he said nothing. Not to protect himself, but to protect me. Pieces clicked together, little things I had ignored, brushed off. How Harold had watched me with a quiet tenderness I couldn't place. How he always seemed to know when I was struggling. How he never pressed. He simply appeared with a crossword or a cup of mint tea. How he treated me not like a stranger, but like someone he had already chosen to care for. I swallowed hard. What am I supposed to do with this? I whispered. Evelyn gave a soft smile, sad, understanding. That's something only you can decide. But I think Arthur wanted you to know you aren't alone. Not now. Not ever. Even in choosing a safeguard for you, he chose someone who would treat you gently. Gently. Harold had never been anything but gentle. I left the office in a fog, the folder tucked under my arm. The autumn wind brushed against my cheeks, cool and grounding. I didn't take a cab back to Cedar Brook. I walked, step by slow step, letting the truth settle around me like falling leaves. When I finally reached the courtyard, Harold was there, as he often was, sitting at our usual table with a crossword book open, an extra pencil set to the side. For me. He looked up, eyes warm, unreadable but kind. Back so soon? I saved you the easy clues, he said with that soft smile. But for the first time, I saw something deeper behind his expression. A history, a promise, a secret he had honored for years. My throat tightened. Harold, we need to talk. He lowered his pencil slowly. I know, he said quietly. And I realized he had been waiting for this moment just as much as I had dreaded it. But I wasn't prepared for Harold's confession, truths he had carried not for weeks or months, but decades. Truths that would reveal why Arthur trusted him with my future in a way that no one else ever could. Harold closed the crossword book gently, sliding the pencil into the spiral binding. He didn't look startled or panicked, just quietly resigned, as though he knew this conversation had been walking toward us for a long time. I sat down across from him. The courtyard was unusually still. Even the breeze seemed to pause, waiting. I visited Elias's daughter, I began, the folder heavy on my lap. I saw the letters, Arthur's plan, everything he asked of them. Harold nodded once, not in surprise but in acknowledgement. My voice trembled. You knew. You knew Arthur. You knew me. All this time. He inhaled deeply, gaze softening. Yes, that single word carried decades. I swallowed. Why didn't you say anything? Harold leaned back slightly, the autumn light catching the silver at his temples. Because Arthur asked me not to. And because grief, it shapes a person. You were raw when you arrived here. Fragile, even if you didn't show it. Knowing me as someone tied to your past would have complicated the healing you desperately needed. His tone wasn't defensive. It was understanding, protective. Arthur trusted you, I whispered. Harold's eyes grew distant. Arthur saved my life once, long before Cedar Brook, long before either of us lost our sis. We were on a field survey when a retaining wall collapsed near the river. I slipped. He didn't even hesitate. Bruised 3 ribs pulling me out. After that, we were brothers in the way life sometimes gives you one. I pressed a hand against my heart. Arthur never told me that story. Harold continued quietly. We worked together for nearly 15 years. Our wives were friends. Our kids played together before your move upstate. Then life happened, we drifted. Careers, relocations, illnesses. Arthur always meant to reconnect. He spoke of you often during our last phone call. Spoke of how lonely you were after Daniel grew distant. A knot tightened in my chest. Why didn't he tell me he reached out to you? I asked. Because he didn't want to burden you, Harold answered gently. He was sick, Lydia. Sicker than he admitted. He told me he didn't want you living your last years fighting battles with family who didn't deserve your tenderness. He paused. He wanted me to look after you. Not as a duty, but as a promise between old friends. My breath shook. All those afternoons in the courtyard. All those quiet conversations. All those moments Harold seemed to know exactly what I needed. Not coincidence. Not fate. Arthur's final request. I blinked back tears. I don't know what to say. Harold folded his hands. Then let me say what Arthur couldn't. He paused, searching my face. You weren't abandoned at that airport, Lydia. You were released. Arthur wanted you to stand on your own feet to feel what life was like when no one took advantage of you. He knew your breaking point would become your turning point. I closed my eyes, letting the truth settle. Harold's voice softened even further. He trusted that when you rebuilt your life, you'd choose people who treated you with dignity. And he asked me to be one of them, not because you needed protecting, but because you deserved companionship. The word companionship lingered in the air between us. Something warm and unfamiliar unfurled in my chest, something like possibility, something like the quiet beginning of a new chapter. Harold, I whispered. He raised a hand gently, stopping me. I'm not asking for anything. Not now, not ever, unless you want it. I only want you to know your husband loved you with his whole heart, and he trusted your future with someone who would never, ever take advantage of your kindness. The wind stirred again, rustling leaves across the courtyard. I felt Arthur in that moment, not as a memory, but as a presence wrapping around me like a final blessing. I wiped a tear from my cheek. Thank you for telling me. Harold gave one slow nod. Whenever you're ready, Lydia, whether for a walk, a crossword, or something more, you have my friendship and my respect. I let out a small breath, shaky but hopeful. I think I'd like to start with a walk. His smile was gentle, warm, familiar like sunlight reaching through clouds. I'd like that too. We rose together, stepping into the courtyard path where red leaves gathered at the edges. And for the first time since Arthur died, I didn't feel alone. Not in the devastating way of loss, and not in the suffocating way of abandonment. I felt accompanied, not replaced, not rescued, accompanied. But just as this new piece began settling into place, a final letter from Elias's office arrived. One that would force Lydia to make a decision that could either close the past for good, or reopen it in a way she never saw coming. The next week passed with a gentleness I hadn't felt in years. Harold and I walked the courtyard paths each morning, sometimes speaking, sometimes silent. It wasn't the awkward silence of strangers. It was the peaceful quiet of two people who understood that words weren't always necessary. Residents noticed the shift, of course. Helen smiled wider when she saw us. Mara raised an eyebrow during yoga but said nothing. And Harold, well, he remained Harold, steady, patient, never rushing anything. For the first time in a long time, I felt as though the pieces of my life had finally settled in their rightful places. Until the envelope arrived. It came on a grey Wednesday afternoon. I found it waiting in my mailbox, stamped with the Rowan firm's insignia. Another letter. Not from Evelyn. Not from Elias's archive. But from the court. I froze in the hallway. Residents shuffled past, chatting about lunch, puzzles, book club. The world moved gently around me, unaware that something inside me had begun to tremble. I took the envelope back to my room and sat on the bed, running a finger along the seal. It was thinner than the folder Evelyn gave me, but something about the weight of it felt heavier. My heart thudded as I opened it. Inside was a formal notice. To Mrs. Lydia Harland. This is to inform you that your son, Daniel Harland, has filed a petition to dispute the validity of your updated estate documents. A hearing date has been issued. You are requested to appear. My breath caught. He was doing it. He was actually doing it. Despite our conversation. Despite my clarity. Despite Arthur's warnings he never knew existed. Daniel was challenging the will, saying I wasn't fit, saying I wasn't capable, saying undoubtedly that someone else influenced my decisions. My hand shook so violently that the page crinkled. A soft knock startled me. I looked up to see Harold standing at the open door, holding 2 cups of tea. His smile faded when he saw my face. "Lydia," he asked gently. "What's wrong?" I handed him the notice with trembling fingers. He read it once, jaw tightening. A muscle in his cheek twitched, a crack in the calm facade he always wore. "He filed a petition," Harold murmured. I'm so sorry," I whispered. "Why would he do this?" "We already talked." I thought he understood. Harold set the tea down and sat beside me. Because understanding and accepting are 2 very different things. He may understand your boundaries, but accepting that he no longer controls your resources, that's another matter. I covered my face with my hands. "I don't want to go through this. I'm tired, Harold. I'm so tired of fighting battles I didn't choose." Harold placed a warm hand on my shoulder, not possessive, just grounding. "You're not alone this time." His voice held a quiet determination. "I know Arthur would say the same, if he were here." That hit something deep inside me. I lowered my hands slowly. "What do I do?" Harold hesitated, then said something I didn't expect. "I think you call Evelyn, and you tell her we will attend the hearing together." "We?" I echoed. He nodded. "Arthur didn't choose me lightly. And I'm not stepping back now." Emotions swelled in my chest: fear, gratitude, grief, hope, all tangled so tightly I couldn't separate them. "I don't want this to get ugly," I whispered. "It won't," Harold said firmly, "because the truth is on your side. The files, the letters, Arthur made everything clear. He saw this coming long before either of us did." I looked down at the court notice again. A hearing. People questioning my choices. Strangers dissecting my life. The old me, the exhausted, grieving, uncertain me, might have surrendered to avoid conflict. But not now, not after Arthur's letters. Not after rediscovering my worth. Not after being shown, by both the past and present, that I deserved peace. I took a deep breath, straightened my back, and folded the notice carefully. "Then we go," I said quietly. Harold smiled, something warm and proud flickering in his eyes. "That's the Lydia Arthur knew you'd become." I felt a swell of strength inside me, not loud or fiery, but steady. The kind of strength built from surviving. The kind of strength Arthur trusted. The kind of strength Daniel never expected. The kind of strength Harold saw without me saying a word. I stood up, smoothing the letter, and placed it inside the folder with Arthur's handwriting. It felt symbolic, past and present joining forces against a future I would shape myself. "Thank you," I whispered to Harold. He shook his head gently. "No, Lydia, thank you for letting me be here." As we stepped out into the hallway together, the storm inside me quieted. I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. But just days before the hearing, a single unexpected phone call from Daniel would shake everything again and force Lydia to confront the part of motherhood she had never been ready to let go of. The days leading up to the court hearing felt strangely calm, too calm, almost. Cedar Brook moved at its usual gentle rhythm. Residents tended the garden beds. Soft laughter floated from the art studio, and the faint scent of baking bread drifted down the hallways. But inside me, a quiet storm churned. I wasn't afraid of the hearing itself. Not anymore. Not with Arthur's letters, Harold's support, and the truth standing solidly on my side. What unsettled me was the silence from Daniel. No calls. No emails. No accusations. No pleas. Just nothing. It was the kind of silence that feels like the moment before a glass shatters. On the third evening before the hearing, I was in my room folding laundry when my phone rang. Not the landline, my personal cell, the one I rarely used anymore. The screen lit up with a name I had both dreaded and expected. Daniele stared at it for several seconds, feeling my heartbeat thump against my ribs. Then slowly I answered. Hello? For a moment, I heard nothing, just a shaky breath. Then Daniel's voice, small and strained. Mom? I closed my eyes, bracing myself. Yes, I'm here. Another breath. Shakier this time. I don't know where to start, he murmured. I sat on the edge of the bed, the phone pressed to my ear. Start with the truth. He gave a soft, humorless laugh. That's the thing. I don't even know what the truth is anymore. I waited. Mom. His voice cracked. I didn't file the petition. My heart stopped. What? I didn't, he repeated desperately. Sabrina did. A cold wave washed over me. Sabrina filled out the forms. She met with the attorney. She sent the paperwork. I didn't even find out until the confirmation letter came in the mail. I sat there, stunned. Why would she? Because she thought we deserved the money. He blurted out, voice shaking. Because she said you weren't thinking clearly. Because she didn't want to lose everything. Because she thinks your choices hurt our future. And what do you think? I asked quietly. Silence. Then, with a sigh that sounded broken, I think I hurt you more than anyone ever has. My throat tightened painfully. Daniel continued, voice thick. I never wanted this. The airport. Mum, that day I know we messed up. I know we hurt you. I know I should have come back for you, fought harder, done something, anything. I felt tears prick my eyes. But I didn't speak. After you left, he whispered. I kept telling myself you were overreacting, that you'd calm down, that things would go back to normal, that deep down I knew you were done. And that terrified me. A soft gasp escaped him. And I didn't call because I didn't know what to say. I didn't email because I was ashamed. I didn't visit because I was afraid you'd look at me and see the kind of son I never wanted to be. I swallowed hard. Daniel. His voice broke completely. I don't want to fight you in court. I don't want your money. I just don't want to lose you. A painful ache filled my chest. Not anger, not resentment, but grief for the years lost between us. Then why didn't you stop her? I asked gently. He exhaled shakily. Because I was weak. Because I let her pressure me. Because I thought maybe you'd talk to me if the court forced it. I closed my eyes. There it was. The truth I had always feared. Daniel didn't want communication, he wanted control. Yet beneath that truth lay something else too. Guilt. Fear. A son trying to untangle decades of expectations and entitlement. I took a slow breath. Daniel, I'm going to the hearing. He sniffed. I figured. And you should know. I continued. I'm not going to change my mind about the estate. A quiet sob escaped him. But he didn't argue. But, I added softly, I haven't given up on the possibility of healing something between us. Not everything. Not the past. But something.
His breath hitched. You're not cutting me off completely? No, I whispered, but you don't get to shape my future. Only I do. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then Daniel said, in a voice barely above a whisper, Thank you, Mom. When the call ended, I sat there for a long time, staring at my reflection in the darkened window. I didn't feel relieved or victorious. I felt human, heartbroken and hopeful, wounded but wiser, open but firm. Motherhood rarely ends cleanly. It stretches, frays, knots, and strains. And sometimes, if both sides choose, it bends without breaking. A soft knock sounded on my door. Harold. "Everything all right?" he asked gently. I nodded, even though my world had shifted again. Yes and no, but I think I'm ready for the hearing. He smiled softly. Good, because we're going to walk through it together. But the hearing would bring more than legal arguments. It would uncover a truth about Daniel's motivations that even he didn't fully understand, and force Lydia to face a choice she never expected to make. The morning of the hearing arrived with a muted gray sky, the kind that made the world feel hushed and suspended. I dressed slowly, choosing a soft navy sweater Arthur once said made my eyes look stronger than I believed. Strength was something I needed today. Not the loud kind, but the steady kind that grows quietly inside a person who has already survived the worst. Harold knocked at exactly 8:15 a.m., punctual as ever. He wore a simple charcoal jacket and carried a folder of papers neatly organized. He didn't hover or rush me, he simply offered his arm. "Ready?" he asked. I nodded, as ready as I can be. The courthouse wasn't crowded, but it felt imposing all the same. Tall ceilings, marble floors, and an air of solemnity that forced every footstep to sound like a vow. Harold stayed by my side with a calm presence that steadied my breathing. Daniel was already there. He sat alone on a bench near the entrance, suit wrinkled, hair disheveled, looking less like a man trying to win a case and more like someone who hadn't slept in days. When he looked up and saw me, his expression wasn't hardened or defiant. It was devastated. He stood, hesitated, then whispered, "Hi, Mom." "Hello, Daniel." He noticed Harold beside me, and something flickered in his eyes. Not anger, but confusion. Maybe even regret. Before he could speak, Sabrina emerged from the restroom, immaculate as always, her expression tight with irritation. She stiffened when she saw me. "Lydia." I simply nodded. "Sabrina." Her posture sharpened. "Let's get this over with." Daniel flinched at her tone. The small telling detail made my chest ache. How much of his life had been dictated by other people's expectations? How many of his decisions were actually his? The bailiff called our case, and we entered the hearing room. It wasn't a dramatic courtroom, not the kind seen on television, just a modest room with wood-paneled walls and a judge with tired eyes who had no patience for theatrics. The proceedings began. Sabrina's attorney presented their position, that I had become isolated, that I was vulnerable, that the will changes were suspicious, that Harold's involvement was questionable. He used phrases like elder influence, emotional instability, and uncharacteristic financial decisions. I felt Harold tense beside me, but I didn't shrink. I didn't crumble. Then it was our turn. Evelyn stepped forward, calm and composed, holding the very folder her father had entrusted to me. "Your Honor," she began, "the accusations presented today are not only inaccurate, but deeply disrespectful to the wishes of the late Arthur Harland." The judge nodded. "You may proceed." Evelyn opened the folder. "We have written letters from Arthur, dated and witnessed, expressing concern for his son's history of pressuring his mother for financial access. We have documentation of Arthur's explicit intent to protect his wife from such circumstances." She handed copies of the letters to the court. Sabrina's face paled. Evelyn continued, steady and unshaken. "We also have evidence of Arthur's long-standing trust in Mr. Harold Avery, whom he had known for decades. Arthur intentionally requested that Mr. Avery act as a protector for Lydia in the event their son attempted to challenge her autonomy." The judge looked up. "Is this true, Mr. Avery?" Harold stood. "It is, and I can attest to Arthur's clarity, intention, and concern." Daniel's eyes filled with tears. Sabrina shot him a sharp glare, as if urging him to contradict the testimony. But he didn't. Something inside him broke open right there. He stood suddenly, voice cracking as he addressed the judge. "Your Honor, He swallowed hard. "I didn't want to file this. I didn't want to challenge my mother. I let someone else make decisions for me. Bad decisions. And I'm ashamed. The room stood still. Even Sabrina froze. Daniel turned to me, tears spilling freely. Mom, I'm so sorry. Not rehearsed, not strategic. Real. The judge exhaled slowly and leaned forward. Mrs. Harland, do you wish to continue defending your filings? I rose to my feet. Yes, Your Honor. I wish to keep my estate as it is. My voice didn't waver. The judge nodded once. Then let the record reflect that the petition is dismissed. Mrs. Harland retains full legal authority over her estate. A gavel struck. The sound resonated like the final heartbeat of an old life ending. Afterwards, as the room emptied, Daniel approached me, alone. His shoulders were hunched, his expression raw and unshielded. I don't expect forgiveness, he whispered, but I want to earn it someday. I touched his cheek, just lightly. That's up to you, Daniel. Not the court, not Sabrina, not money. You. He nodded, tears streaming, and for the first time in years, I saw the boy I once raised. Not entitled, not demanding, but human and hurting. Sabrina, realizing her influence had shattered, stormed out without a word. Harold stepped beside me, steady as ever. Are you all right? He asked. I let out a long, slow breath. Yes, I said softly. I think I finally am. If you like my story, please like this video, subscribe channel, and comment below what kind of story you like this. I will find for you real stories